Quad66. Alright, so let me see if I can show you this quad without destroying it. So, this is the quad, this is the build that kind of surprised me. This is the 1202.5 with the high kV motors, 11,500 kV. And flying at 2S with GenFan T65s. So, this quad has some serious punch out. And I am flying it on the bigger batteries. These are on the 530 milliamp. It's the equivalent of the 450. So these are the yellow label and the same size as the pink label 450s. And with this battery, I'm getting pretty nice flight times, 4 minutes up to 5 minutes. And it's a fun quad to fly. So it's got pretty nice throw to it. Oh, kind of messed that one up. Backed out of it. It's got a nice throw, and it travels a little further. It carries a little further than my 1103 build with the T65s and the 300 milliamp battery. And some of that's just going to be the weight. So this is 10 grams heavier than the 1103 build with a smaller battery. And so the mass is just going to carry it. The other thing it does, though, is I think these motors, the lower end of the power band down here, the motors spin down a little bit more than the 1103s. And so what that means is that when you do throw it, there's less float to it. There's less parachute effect. And so the quad's just going to carry a little further. And so that does some fun things for you if you want to kind of throw it over the house or some stuff like that. You're going to have more time to be able to do that. Now, the downsides of that. So it's going to have a little more momentum. So when I come in here to this proximity stuff, it's going to be flying with a little bit more momentum, and it takes me like a second to kind of figure that out. And it's definitely a little bit more challenging. But it's doable. It's not so much that I'm like totally sweating white knuckling it. I can still do it. And then when I want to have my grins, I can just throw it up over the house insanely, which is kind of nice. I've built this up on a slightly smaller frame. This is, instead of the 115, this is on 110 millimeter, and it's slightly thinner. It's 2.5 millimeters, and I think that's enough thickness when we come down to the slightly smaller frame, because the logs still look pretty good. I had one quirk with the logs that I had this little spike down low, couldn't figure out what it was. As it turns out, it was battery wobble. So I have these TPU mounts, but apparently that's not quite enough, and so now that I threw on some rubber bands in addition to the TPU, that little low frequency spike went away, and cleaned up the quad's logs, cooled the motors down a little bit, and so lesson learned there. TPU is not quite enough, but what I'm finding with the TPU and the rubber band combination is that because I have the TPU kind of as a sort of end stop, there's not as much stress on the rubber bands, and they seem to be lasting longer. Because that was one of the annoying things about the rubber bands. I use these really thin hair braid ones, and they would just break super easy. So with this, they don't seem to be breaking quite as easily, which is kind of a nice little benefit. What else can I say about this quad? So these are the flywheel motors. It's kind of nice to repurpose them. These are the 1S motors that we're doing on 3-inch, and have a new use for them, because on the 3-inch, we've gone to bigger motors there, and I think rightly so. And so these were kind of sitting there, hanging out, not doing a whole lot for me, and now I've got a new use for them. So there's about pretty typical flight time, getting 4:15, still have a little bit left, and getting about 4 to 5 on these batteries, which is pretty decent. So that's pretty much done. Let's fling it down. Let's see where it settles out. Settles out easily, safe place. So it's like going to be 3.55 per cell, almost 3.6 per cell. So this is the Warpig 110 and 2.5 millimeters, built up with the Flywoo 1202.5s, 11,500 kV. RCN Power also has their version out there. There's various ones out there. And I'm flying out with the T65s. T65s, unfortunately, you got to use prop screws, use some nylon prop screws, and you got to balance them a little bit. And then flying with slightly bigger battery than I typically do on my 2-inch, but it works well with that 500 milliamp size battery. So yellow label's 530, pink label's 450 on the G&Bs. All right, till next time, cheers.